Senate will come to order. Chaplain Dr. Black will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Almighty and merciful Father of us all, today remind our lawmakers of the Judgment Day story in Matthew chapter 25. In that story, you asked 6 questions of humanity. Did you feed the hungry? Did you clothe the naked? Did you give water to the thirsty? Did you visit the sick? Did you minister to the incarcerated? Did you care for the strangers in your midst? As our senators, during this government shutdown, play the game of legislative tug-of-war, may they remember these 6 Judgment Day questions. Lord, may we all hear in these Judgment Day questions the cries of the friendless, helpless, and powerless. We pray in your righteous name. Amen.
Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each. Senator from Iowa.
Since 1993, Congress has adopted a resolution to recognize this 3rd week of October as National Character Count Week. And of course, we're in that week right now. As Iowa's senior U.S. Senator, I'm proud to sponsor the resolution and share that the global headquarters for Character Counts organization is located in my home state. The Robert D. and Billy Ray Center is located at Drake University. By the way, Bob Ray was Iowa's governor for 14 years. So the location in Des Moines makes perfect sense to me because Iowa's values align with the 6 pillars of character promoted by the National Character Counts organization. These include trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. Throughout my public service, I strive to improve civic engagement and bridge divisions through respectful dialogue. Part of that effort includes my annual 99 county meetings, where I meet with Iowans face-to-face. No topic is off limit, and Iowans set the agenda. Each year, the Drake University Ray Center celebrates Iowa's Character Awards to recognize those who embody civic values. The people of Spencer, Iowa will receive Community Character Award of 2025 in recognition of their effort to recover from devastating floods the summer of last year. Like the courageous first responders from 9/11, emergency response teams from across northwest Iowa pitched in to help the people of Spencer. They didn't stop to consider creed, race, gender, or political affiliation. They were only concerned about those who had the needs caused by the devastating flood. So they simply rolled up their sleeves. They simply pulled together, neighbors helping neighbor. And of course, that's the Iowa way. History tells us how important it is for elected leaders to govern by virtue. At the Virginia Ratifying Convention, debating whether or not Virginia should ratify the new Constitution, James Madison said, quote, "To suppose that any form of government will secure liberty or happiness without any virtue in the people is a chimerical idea," end of quote. The American people who elected us are counting on us to live by those standards. National Character Counts Week is a good time to do what's right. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move to proceed to calendar number 168, H.R. 5371.
Clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 168, H.R. 5371, an act making continuing appropriations and extensions for fiscal year 2026 and for other purposes.
Mr. President, you have to give the Democrats credit for one thing, and that's a healthy dose of gall. Both the House and Senate Democrat leaders were out last week claiming that they can't fund the government until, get this, we solve the, quote, Republican health care crisis, end quote. That's right, the Republican health care crisis. It is truly amazing how a program Democrats created and tax credits that they chose to sunset have now become the Republicans' crisis. Republicans, in fact, never had anything to do with it. Democrats created Obamacare alone. They implemented the enhanced tax credits alone. And they chose a sunset date for those tax credits alone. Democrats are solely responsible for the Obamacare tax credit cliff. And yet they're trying to pin this disaster on Republicans while at the very same time they're asking Republicans to bail them out. It's really kind of ironic, Mr. President. Now, Democrats may not win a lot of points for truthfulness, but you have to give them credit for gall. Now, Mr. President, while Democrats may have created this health care situation, I have made it clear from the beginning that Republicans are willing to have a discussion about how to address it. In fact, I'm perfectly willing to guarantee Democrats a vote. But none of that is going to happen until Democrats reopen the government. We're not going to negotiate on anything until Democrats stop holding government funding hostage. And if they really want to address their Obamacare mess, they should stop running out the clock on a deal. And all they're doing by that action, Mr. President, is keeping the government shut down and enhancing, believe it or not, the chances this situation doesn't get fixed because the clock is running. Now, Mr. President, before I leave the subject of health care, I do have to mention the irony that while Democrats claim they're defending Americans' health care, their shutdown has actually suspended valuable health care services for a lot of Americans. Medicare and rural patients are currently dealing with the elimination of telehealth services thanks to the government shutdown. Telehealth, of course, increases the accessibility of care and lets those who live far from medical treatment or who otherwise struggle to travel to conduct prescription refill appointments or other visits from the comfort of their home. But that assistance is currently being denied to them thanks to the Democrat shutdown. But I'm not sure why I'm talking about shutdown costs. Democrats have made it very clear that they don't care about the costs of the shutdown to anyone. Democrats used to care, of course, or so they claimed. In fact, I could fill a book with Democrat quotes on how shutdowns harm hardworking Americans. But over the past 3 weeks, it's become clear that Democrats' previous concerns had more to do with politics than with principle. Democrats were against shutdowns when it served their purposes, and now that it serves their purposes, or so they think, to keep the government closed, they're all for shutdowns, no matter how many Americans have to suffer in the process. Well, Mr. President, I've talked about health care today, and Democrats would definitely like Americans to think that that's what this shutdown is about. But of course, the biggest driver of the shutdown is not health care or any other issue. It's the Democrats' far-left base. Left-wing activists demanded a showdown with President Trump, and Democrats fell in line. That's why you see the Democrat leader, who actually voted to fund the government in the spring, leading the shutdown brigade this time around. Far-left groups were rallying this weekend, and the Democrat leader and other Democrat senators were out paying homage. And if these same left-wing groups have their way, Democrats will be keeping up the shutdown for a long time to come. They don't really care about the solution, Mr. President. It's about politics. For the sake of the American people, let's hope that there are some Democrat senators who will eventually put the needs of their constituents over the demands of their far-left base and work with Republicans to pass the clean, nonpartisan funding measure that is saying right here in front of us today. And when passed, will be sent to the President and signed into law, and this government will open up again. Mr. President, I yield the floor. I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Also-Brooks.
Mr. President,
Democrat Leader.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
So, Mr. President, we enter another week of Donald Trump's government shutdown. And Republicans seem happy not to work, happy not to negotiate, happy to let health care premiums spike for over 20 million working and middle-class Americans. Our country is staring down the barrel of a health care catastrophe, and Republicans will spend this week either vacationing or holding pep rallies at the White House. It's been over a month since the House of Representatives even took a single roll call vote. That's shameful. That's derelict. Government workers must work without getting paid. House Republicans get paid without working. What about the Democrats? Our position remains the same. We want to end the shutdown as soon as we can and fix the ACA premium crisis that looms over 20 million hardworking Americans and many tens of millions more whose premiums will also go up. Look, the ACA premium crisis is not a fix-it-later issue, like Republicans keep pretending it is. It's a fix-it-now issue, because very soon Americans are going to have to make some really difficult choices about which health care plan they choose for next year. When they see the amounts of money, when they see the increase in the number of dollars that these premiums will cost them because the tax credits expire, $500 a month, $600 a month, $1,000 a month for older couples in the over $20,000 a month, they're going to have to make an awful choice. Do I cut out health care altogether and be left alone? Or do I cut back on everything else to afford a health care plan? Do I have to look for a new plan with different doctors, different hospitals, higher copays, higher premiums? Every American, just about every American, or so many Americans, tens of millions, are going to have to start making that choice the next month. Health insurance prices under the ACA are now available in about a dozen states, and Americans in those states are already seeing with their own eyes the horrifying truth, what we've been warning about for months, that multiple millions of people are going to pay tens of thousands of dollars more for health care, so vital to Americans. When you are in a family and you know you can't provide health care for them or much reduced health care, and you look at your spouse, you look at your kids, and you say, what am I going to do if they get sick? What a frightening experience for people that Republicans are putting America through, all because they wanted to cut Medicaid and cut so much else in health care to pay for tax cuts for the wealthy. It's just perverse. It's inside out. It's upside down. And let's be clear about who will get hurt if these tax credits expire. Republicans have been lying about that, too. If the ACA premium tax credits expire, the majority of people who will pay more out of pocket are working and middle-class families. In fact, the majority of people who benefit from the expiring tax credits live in Republican districts. The state of Louisiana, home of Speaker Johnson, is one of the states about to suffer most. I read an article last week from CNBC. It said, the headline, ACA enhanced subsidy lapse could hit early retirees hardest. Middle-class couples in their 50s and early 60s who were too young to qualify for Medicare face the largest dollar increase in premium payments. One Idaho couple interviewed by CNBC will see their premiums spike not by 50%, not by 100%, by 300%. $15,000 more a year just to have health insurance. That's what financial ruin looks like. In fact, if these tax credits expire, older Americans could end up spending 30% of their income just on health care premiums. Can you imagine? What kind of country do we live in? What kind of party is this Republican Party that is unwilling to solve this problem, which is staring Americans in the face, frightening Americans from one end of the country to the other? And yet Republicans, what are they doing about it? Nothing. They're on vacation. It's unacceptable and morally repugnant. Democrats are demanding nothing more or less than what the overwhelming majority of Americans already want. Even a majority of MAGA voters want it. 58% of those who voted for Trump say renew the tax credits on into next year. Americans want to keep their health care costs low and avoid financial ruin. Americans want to see the government reopened as soon as possible. And Democrats agree, we're at the ready. We want to get past this crisis, but Republicans need to wake up from whatever dream they're in, because fixing the ACA will require them to take action. Now, on the economy. Republicans like to talk about eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. Well, they can start by looking at Secretary Kristi Noem's expense report. This weekend, the New York Times reported that the Department of Homeland Security has purchased not one but two private jets, luxury jets, for Kristi Noem to the tune of $172 million in taxpayer dollars. The administration says these are G700 aircraft. That's one of the biggest planes there is, private planes there is. And they say they were purchased for safety reasons. Kristi Noem and the administration say these G700 aircraft were purchased for safety reasons. That's like saying you bought a Rolls-Royce to get good seatbelts. This just shows you how much contempt this administration has for people struggling to make ends meet. Let's be very clear. At a time that Americans are paying more for groceries, falling behind on car payments, seeing their electricity rates go up and up and up, Secretary Noem thinks it's a good use of taxpayer dollars to buy two jets known for having, quote, the most spacious cabin in the industry. Whatever happened to the Kristi Noem who said any expense at DHS over $100,000 needed her personal approval? Apparently, she wanted more legroom for flying. This would all be perhaps a little more amusing if it wasn't so insulting to the American people. Because while Donald Trump's cabinet secretaries get their private jets, the American people are getting higher health care premiums, higher grocery costs, a worsening job market. Let me just show this chart, a list of awful headlines about the economy just from last week or so. From NBC, U.S. consumers bearing more than half the cost of tariffs so far, Goldman Sachs says. In the Wall Street Journal, grocery prices keep rising, frustrated consumers are trying to adapt. Market Watch, high inflation and lack of jobs leave Americans frustrated with the economy. Those are headlines last week. So let me get this straight. Americans pay 90% of the cost of Donald Trump's tariffs for more groceries. They see fewer jobs, and now the American people have to pay for two top-tier private luxury jets for Kristi Noem. If you want to know how much contempt Donald Trump has, how much contempt his MAGA administration has for working people, look no further than Noem's luxury jets. Yield the floor, note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alston-Brooks.
Mr. President, are we in a quorum call?
We are.
Ask unanimous consent the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last Friday, I went back to the city of Chicago I'm honored to represent. And over the weekend, had two experiences I want to share with you. There was a real contrast, but there was a recurring theme in both. The first was at a church in the city of Chicago on Friday, Christ Lutheran Church. It's on Wilson Avenue in a section of Chicago known as Albany Park. The church was built in 1911. You look around at the houses outside that church and you think, this neighborhood's seen a lot of change, a lot of different people who came through with waves of immigration. Today it's predominantly Hispanic, but I would imagine that the march of history would take you through many other groups that lived in the Albany Park neighborhood. The pastor there is named Tom Terrell. I was meeting him for the first time. We had a press conference inside his little church, and he told us a story of what had happened at his church, Christ Lutheran Church in Albany Park in Chicago, on the previous Sunday. There aren't as many people in his church as there were just a few months ago because a lot of them are too afraid. They're Hispanic families, and they're afraid if they go to that church, they might be detained or arrested or something else terrible might happen. But some brave souls made it to the Christ Lutheran Church on that Sunday, and Pastor Terrell told us the story. At the end of the ceremony at noon, the people were leaving and heading home, walking away from church, when an unmarked van pulled up and ICE agents came out of it and started to ask questions of the people that just came out of church. It was noticed in the neighborhood and what is now becoming more common in Chicago. The neighbors started coming out with whistles, standing on the front porch and blowing whistles because the ICE agents were intimidating these people who were just leaving church. Eventually, enough people started blowing whistles that the ICE agents decided to tear gas the people coming out of church. They threw the tear gas canisters, got in their van, and left. Going to church on Sunday in Albany Park in the city of Chicago was an opportunity for an ICE raid. That's what's happening in the city of Chicago, and it's not confined to that neighborhood. It's happening there and in the surrounding suburbs. Are the people afraid? You bet they are. They're afraid of what's going to happen to them and their families. The stories come pouring in, one after the other. Remember how we got started in this conversation? Remember when the president said at his rallies over and over again, we're going after rapists, terrorists, murderers, those who are criminally insane, and those who are predators of children. They came into this country illegally and they're not going to stay. Well, Christ Lutheran Church was not the place to visit if you're looking for those categories. Those people there were not guilty of any crimes other than going to church, if that's a crime in the eyes of some. It certainly isn't in my eyes. That's the reality. 70% of the people who are being detained and arrested in the city of Chicago have no criminal record. No criminal record. And yet they're being intimidated. The restaurants in many parts of the city aren't what they used to be. People are not going shopping. They're afraid to go outside at all. That's the reality. My second experience this week in Chicago is on the same theme. Mr. President, on Saturday, an estimated 7 million Americans across this country took to the streets peacefully with a singular message to President Trump and his enablers. We have no kings in the United States. That included 100,000 people in Chicago, and I was proud to be one of them. That's the front line, as we know, of the president's assault on our democracy, our civil liberties, and our rule of law. Now, I've been in Congress for 4 decades, so believe me when I say that the turnout in this march was the largest I've ever seen at any political gathering. It was amazing. The president is trying to tell the world that it's unsafe to be in the city of Chicago. Well, the weekend before this, we had our 53,000 runners in the Chicago Marathon with tens of thousands of supporters and family cheering them on. They weren't afraid to be in Chicago, and neither was I. And this last Saturday, this gathering of people in the city of Chicago, without violence, expressing themselves as Americans, disagreeing with our government, which is part of democracy, was a peaceful gathering by and large. I joined the march in the city of Chicago and carried a sign that read, "Hands off Chicago," and I meant it. Chicago is a great city. It faces challenges, but all cities face challenges. These challenges must be addressed with solutions that are consistent with our American values. This president is abusing his power by fueling this cruel immigration raid policy, unleashing the military, bringing in National Guard men and women from the state of Texas against immigrants and citizens alike. Don't believe me? I'll show you. The president claims his actions are meant to round up, quote, the worst of the worst, but that's been anything but the case. A few weeks ago, Chicago and the nation watched in horror as women and children, immigrants and U.S. citizens alike, were dragged from their homes in South Shore of Chicago, detained with the use of zip ties. Imagine your child rousted out of bed in the middle of the night when the front door of your apartment is crashed down, and that child is taken downstairs, separated from his mother and father with a zip tie, holding his hands together. When one witness complained that these children were being mistreated, I'm sorry to tell you, the person from ICE said, "F them kids." And just last week, ProPublica reported that in the first 9 months of the Trump administration, ICE held over 170 American citizens across the country, kicking, dragging, beating, and detaining some of them for days. Let me repeat, they were American citizens. Take Maria Greeley, a Chicagoan and U.S. citizen detained by federal agents earlier this month in Chicago. She showed them her passport, but they zip-tied her and held her for hours because she, quote, didn't look like someone named Greeley. Let me give you another example. On October the 3rd, Juan Munoz, trustee for the township of Oak Park in Illinois, stood with protesters outside the ICE Broadview processing facility along with other elected officials. Federal agents picked him out of the crowd, shoved him to the ground, and arrested him while they left his colleagues alone. They held him for 8 hours. Why did they hold Juan Munoz for that long and not his colleagues? He was a person of color. Does this sound like the work of an administration set on reducing violent crime? I think not. This cruelty is all for show. While Americans continue to pay inflated prices at the checkout aisle and face the prospect of skyrocketing healthcare premium costs, this is what our president is focusing on. We, the people, stood up this weekend to the president's abuses of power. I hope the Supreme Court, when the time comes, will do the same. The founders of this nation designed the Constitution to protect generations of Americans from the very abuses we are watching unfold before our eyes today. They understood the dangers of a military turned against its own people and limiting their role in civilian affairs. President Trump's claims of so-called invasions, rebellions, emergencies to justify calling the military into American cities like Chicago are baseless. They are simply attempts to bypass laws and the checks and balances of the Constitution. Judges in Portland, Oregon, and Chicago, Illinois, appointed by presidents of both political parties, have agreed. In upholding a ruling temporarily barring the deployment of troops in Chicago, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals concluded, and I quote, "The facts do not justify the president's actions in Illinois. Political opposition is not rebellion." In fact, the court noted the Department of Homeland Security itself claims the protests have not slowed down their operations and that ICE has increased its deportations and arrests. Political opposition, peaceful protests, Even nonviolent civil disobedience are not rebellion. They are the bedrocks of our democracy. And if there are legitimate concerns with maintaining law and order, protecting public safety, and controlling crime, the Constitution preserves the power to address that to the states, not the federal government. Whether in Chicago, Portland, Los Angeles, Memphis, or the District of Columbia, it is civilian authorities, state and local law enforcement, that have the primary responsibility for enforcing the law. I'm glad to see federal judges, including judges appointed by President Trump himself, upholding their constitutional responsibility to interpret the law and apply it to the facts. It's no surprise that President Trump is now asking the Supreme Court's conservative supermajority to greenlight his abuse of power and allow him to deploy troops regardless of statutory limit or the actual facts on the ground. The Supreme Court should reject the president's petition. There is no emergency that would justify bypassing the regular appeals process and resolving this case on the court's shadow docket without full public scrutiny that it deserves. My warning to my Republican colleagues is this. Durbin of Illinois is standing on the floor of the Senate today telling you what's happening to the state and people I love to represent. If the president is allowed to send the military against his own citizens in Chicago without regard to the laws enacted by Congress, what guardrails are left to preventing him from doing it to you in your home state, to the people that you are proud to represent here in the Senate? We cannot sit idly by while a person who wants to be king takes us down the path to authoritarianism. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Texas.
Madam President, today is the 20th day of the Schumer shutdown. And people around the country are beginning to feel the effects of the shutdown. For example, here, nearly all federal employees, from government agencies to those working here in the Senate chamber, will have missed their first paycheck. 1 out of every 6 Americans lives from paycheck to paycheck. It's not uncommon. This means that the shutdown is preventing those individuals from paying their basic expenses: food, shelter, clothing, utilities. Normally, Americans who aren't able to put food on the table for themselves and their families can fall back on government programs should they qualify. However, the U.S. Department of Agriculture recently sent a letter to the states, including Texas, announcing they will not be able to continue funding the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, due to the lapse in congressional appropriations. According to federal law, food programs like SNAP and WIC, the Women and Infants and Children program, may continue to operate even during the shutdown as long as funds are available. But once those funds are dried up, it's simply not possible for them to continue providing benefits. The guidance from the U.S. Department of Agriculture directs states to pause those payments for the programs. This means that Texans who rely upon SNAP as a safety net to buy their groceries and feed their children will not have those benefits until this deranged shutdown comes to an end. During the negotiations on the One Big Beautiful Bill, the Working Families Tax Cut Act, I was happy to champion certain reforms to ensure that those benefits were targeted on the truly poor and vulnerable. Chief among those reforms were enhanced eligibility verification and work requirements for able-bodied adults, ensuring that those who can work do work in order to continue to receive benefits. Throughout those negotiations, Democrats accused Republicans of taking food from the mouths of the poor and needy. But of course, this is not what we did with the One Big Beautiful Bill at all. The reforms we implemented in the One Big Beautiful Bill ensured that these programs were financially secure for the long haul, so we can continue to provide those benefits to those who truly need them. But now, Senate Democrats have voted 9 times against a House-passed short-term funding bill that would immediately reopen the government. And now they are preventing these programs from operating at all. So what Democrats falsely accused Republicans of just a few weeks back, they themselves are doing by forcing these programs to end or to pause. Senate Democrats are literally taking food from the mouths of hungry children. These programs are designed to ensure that those who have come across hard times are able to get the food they need for themselves and their children. And now Senate Democrats are the reason why Texans, particularly those in need, are unable to do so now. But that's not all. This shutdown is creating a particularly severe consequence for rural health clinics across America, many of which are unable to continue their full telehealth services to patients during the shutdown. One of my constituents wrote in to say that not being able to offer telehealth has put us at a huge disadvantage with patients. There are many who will seek care elsewhere and some who won't seek care at all. One of the only good things to come out of COVID-19 is the expansion of access to telehealth. And now, because of the shutdown, Democrats are denying patients that need that access, denying them that access altogether. This constituent that I mentioned a moment ago that I quoted described an immunocompromised Texans who were discharged from the hospital who require follow-up appointments, but the risk of infection from other patients in the waiting room makes it actually too risky for them to appear in the hospital in person. Telehealth appointments are a good solution for such patients, but due to the shutdown, they're simply not available. For other patients who live in rural areas who are homebound from severe illnesses, telehealth can be the difference between receiving care and receiving no care. My office recently heard a devastating story about one such patient in a Texas hospital who has stage 4 cancer and who has missed his last 2 appointments. This individual lives 45 minutes from care in the Panhandle in North Texas and is a model patient for telehealth, but thanks to Senate Democrats, that is no longer an option for him. Madam President, imagine the devastation of having a loved one suffer from late-stage cancer and knowing that this person is missing out of access to health care because of the Schumer shutdown. It's simply indefensible. And these are real people, real patients, and real Texans. Now, this government shutdown may not affect the Democratic leader or some members of Congress who are independently well off. But for those people who depend on these services and who live paycheck to paycheck, it has real-world consequences. This government shutdown is, in other words, not a game. And yet Senate Democrats refuse to treat this matter with the seriousness that it deserves. It's been quoted many times now, but the minority leader has said to the news media, quote, "Every day gets better for us," close quote. Well, clearly he's not talking about the individuals I've been referring to. I'd like to see the minority leader, the senator from New York, say those words to the cancer patient who's unable to get access to treatment or to telehealth services, or the family who relies on food stamps who's unable to put groceries on the table to feed their family, or to the Capitol police officers who provide security in this very building who are not receiving a paycheck. I can guarantee the Democratic leader that those people will not say to him that every day is getting better. The people who we work for, our constituents, the folks who sent us here, are growing more apprehensive by the day, not knowing when this will end. And while many people simply don't feel the effect of a government shutdown, very real people, like the ones I mentioned, definitely feel this shutdown. And it doesn't have to be this way. All we have to do, as we've said time and time again, is pass the short-term funding bill that will only take us to November the 21st. It's already passed the House of Representatives. 3 Democrats in the Senate have joined Republicans in voting to reopen the government. Are there not 5 more Democrats willing to buck the heartless display of the minority leader and put the American people first rather than their political party and their political aspirations? Well, I hope that the cries of those children who are without food and homebound cancer patients without access to health care will carry more weight with Senate Democrats than the ruthless partisanship coming from the Democratic leader. This is called the Schumer shutdown for a reason, because there is, in fact, one person ultimately responsible in this chamber. The House has passed the bill. All Republicans are willing to support it, and we just need a few more Senate Democrats to put an end to this foolishness. Madam President, I yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alston-Brooks. Madam President,
The senator from Kentucky.
I ask unanimous consent to waive the mandatory quorum call. I ask unanimous consent to vitiate the quorum call.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent to waive the mandatory quorum call with respect to the cloture motion on the motion to proceed to calendar item 168, H.R. 5371.
Without objection.
I further ask unanimous consent that notwithstanding Rule 22 at 2:20 p.m. tomorrow, the Senate vote on the motion to invoke cloture on the Moe nomination, and if cloture is invoked on the Moe nomination, all post-cloture time be expired, and the Senate vote on the motion to invoke cloture on the Mercer nomination. Further, if cloture on the Mercer nomination, if cloture is invoked on the Mercer nomination, all post-cloture time be expired, and the Senate vote on confirmation of the Moe nomination at 5:30 p.m., and the Senate vote on the confirmation of the Mercer nomination at a time to be determined by the majority leader in consultation with the Democrat leader no earlier than Wednesday, October 22nd. Further, if confirmed, the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, and the President be immediately notified of the Senate's actions. Finally, that the remaining clotures filed on October 16th ripen at a time to be determined by the majority leader in consultation with the Democrat leader on Wednesday, October 22nd.
Without objection.
And I ask unanimous consent that the scheduled roll call begin immediately.
The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture. By unanimous consent,
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close debate on the motion to proceed to calendar number 168, H.R. 5371, an act making continuing appropriations and extensions for fiscal year 2026 and for other purposes, signed by 17 senators.
by unanimous consent, the mandatory quorum call has been waived. A quorum is present. The question is it the sense of the Senate that debate on the motion to proceed, H.R. 5371, an act making continuing appropriations and extensions for fiscal year 2026 and for other purposes, shall be brought to a close? The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Also Brooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Britt.
Aye.
Mr. Budd. Ms. Cantwell. Mrs. Capito. Mr. Cassidy. Mr. Coons. Mr. Cornyn. Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Cotton. Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz. Mr. Curtis. Mr. Daines. Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Ms. Hirono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice, Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee,
I'm working on it.
Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Moreno, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young. Senators voting in the affirmative: Bozeman, Britt, Cassidy, Crapo, Haggerty, Husted, Johnson, Kennedy, Marshall, Tuberville. Senators voting in the negative: Bennett, Cantwell, Gallego, Hassan, Heinrich, Hickenlooper, Kim, Markey, Paul, Peters, Van Hollen. Mr. Moreno, aye. Mr. Ossoff, no. Mr. Lujan, no. Mr. Reed, no. Mr. Young, aye. Mr. Wyden, no. Mrs. Shaheen, no. Ms. Blunt-Rochester. Ms. Blunt-Rochester, no. Ms. Hirono, no. Mr. McCormick, aye. Mrs. Moody, aye. Mrs. Fisher, aye.
Mr. Wicker, aye. Mr. Graham, aye. Mr. Padilla, no. Mr. Sheehy. Mr. Sheehy, aye. Mr. Hawley. Mr. Hawley, aye. Mr. Budd. Mr. Budd, aye. Mr. Kane. Mr. Kane, no. Mr. Merkley. Mr. Merkley, no. Mr. Warnock. Mr. Warnock, no. Ms. Lummis. Ms. Lummis, aye. Mr. Schmidt. Mr. Schmidt, aye. Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner, no. Ms. Collins. Ms. Collins, aye. Mr. Ricketts. Mr. Ricketts, aye. Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott of Florida, aye. Mr. Coons. Mr. Coons, no. Ms. Rosen. Ms. Rosen, no. Mr. King. Mr. King, aye. Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, aye. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Hoven, aye. Mr. Daines. Mr. Daines, aye. Ms. Ernst. Ms. Ernst, aye. Mr. Booker. Mr. Booker, no. Mrs. Hyde Smith. Mrs. Hyde Smith, aye. Mr. Schiff. Mr. Schiff, no. Mr. Langford. Mr. Langford, aye. Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith, no. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly, no. Mrs. Murray. Mrs. Murray, no. Mrs. Capito. Mrs. Capito, aye. Mr. Rounds. Mr. Rounds, aye. Mrs. Blackburn. Mrs. Blackburn, aye. Mr. Moran. Mr. Moran, aye. Ms. Alsobrooks. Ms. Alsobrooks, no. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Durbin, no. Mr. Banks. Mr. Banks, aye. Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, aye. Ms. Cortez Masto. Ms. Cortez Masto, aye. Ms. Baldwin. Ms. Baldwin, no. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mrs. Gillibrand, no. Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott of South Carolina, aye. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Barrasso, aye. Ms. Warren. Ms. Warren, no. Mr. Mullen. Mr. Mullen, aye. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Cornyn, aye. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Grassley, aye. Ms. Klobuchar. Ms. Klobuchar, no. Mr. Justice. Mr. Justice, aye. Mr. Cotton. Mr. Cotton, Aye. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blumenthal, no. Mr. Risch. Mr. Risch, aye. Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy, no. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Whitehouse, no. Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, aye. Ms. Slotkin. Ms. Slotkin, no. Mr. Schatz. Mr. Schatz, no. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Cruz, aye. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Kramer, aye. Mr. Thune. Mr. Thune, aye. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Schumer, no. Mr. Thune. Mr. Thune, no.
On this vote, there are 50 yeas votes, and the nays are 43. The 3/5 of the Senate only duly chosen and sworn not having voted in the affirmative. The motion is not agreed to.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader?
Enter a motion to reconsider.
The motion is entered.
I send a cloture motion to the desk.
The clerk will report.
Cloture motion, we, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close debate on the motion to proceed to Calendar 168, H.R. 5371, an act making continuing appropriations and extensions for fiscal year 2026 and further purposes, signed by 17 senators as follows.
President, I ask consent the reading of the names be waived.
Without objection.
And I move to proceed to executive session and consider executive calendar number 458.
The questions on the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion is agreed to. The clerk will report the nomination.
Nomination, the Judiciary, Bill Lewis of Alabama to be United States District Judge for the Middle District.
Mr. President, I send a cloture motion to the desk.
Clerk will report.
Cloture motion, we, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close debate on the nomination of Bill Lewis of Alabama to be United States District Judge for the Middle District of Alabama, signed by 17 senators as follows.
Consent the reading of the names be waived.
Without objection.
And I move to proceed to legislative session.
The questions on the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion is agreed to.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
And I ask unanimous consent that the appointment at the desk appear separately in the record as if made by the chair.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Finance be discharged from further consideration of H.R. 998 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report.
H.R. 998, an act to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to require additional information on math and clerical error notices.
Without objection, the committee is discharged. The Senate will proceed to the measure.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs be discharged from further consideration of S-284 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report.
S-284, a bill to reauthorize the Congressional Award Act.
Without objection, the committee is discharged. The Senate will proceed to the measure.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it stand adjourned until 10 a.m. on Tuesday, October the 21st, that following the prayer and pledge, the journal proceedings be approved today at the morning hour be deemed expired, and the time for the two leaders be reserved for their use later in the day. The Senate be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, and 11 a.m. the Senate execute the order of October 16th in relation to the Moody nomination. Further, that the Senate recess following disposition of the Moody nomination until 2:15 p.m. to allow for the weekly conference meetings. Finally, if any nominations are confirmed during Tuesday's session of the Senate, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, and the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action.
Without objection.
Mr. President, if there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it stand adjourned under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.